Gervais Restaurant, authentic French cuisine in Silicon Valley.
The topic is one near and dear to my heart. We like to think that one of the things we try to do with the magazine is cover innovation, and particularly what we cover is the financing of innovation. You know, the dirty part, the money. You know. So, but the great ideas and the great innovations and great advances are what we're all trying to track and follow. And I was very intrigued by the topic here, integrating customers into the innovation process. So I'm going to ask each of you to just say a few, according to the guidelines of our moderation, our panel here, just to take a couple of minutes to describe who you are and what you do, and then we'll start talking about how you use the customer input or how you can integrate customer input into the creative process. So I'll start just geographically with Michael here.
So my name is Michael Heinrich. I work for SAP in a team called the Design Services Team, and I'm one of the co-leads of the team. We report directly, not to the product areas or to the service areas, directly to the CEO. Our charter in life is to bring design-led innovation to the company. We're a team of 30 people. SAP, as you know, is 35,000 people. So teaching all those people how you connect better with your customers, how you bring innovation from customer contact into the company as one of the routes of innovation. And when we say innovation, it's not just the products, it's also the services, all the touch points that people have with the company. I must say one thing about customers. In our business, which is the enterprise software business, customers and end users are two different species. We have to keep that in mind. We're selling to the customer, but the people using our products, the end users, have totally different goals and objectives. So that's one of the things that we learn and that we, in the process of learning, teach the rest of the company, the rest of SAP.
Okay, so I'm Henry Terry. In Finnish we roll the R's, so it usually makes it much harder for people to remember the names, so Henry Terry will be fine. I'm heading the Systems Research Centers at Nokia Research. Nokia Research is the research arm of Nokia. And then we have, of course, the development arm that's about 20,000 people. So Nokia Research itself is about 1,000. And I'm heading the System Research Centers. We divide the research in both the core technology centers and systems research centers. Core technology centers is what I call the keep the engine running. So it's related of the innovations and technology to our roadmaps of our core business. And systems research centers is responsible for looking the new roads where to run, which means that the new business driven innovation for Nokia. For me, this task is somewhat challenging, like I was mentioned, because in addition to the new lab in Palo Alto, that is actually having its grand opening tomorrow. Here, I had this lab to run in Tokyo, Beijing, Bochum, Nanosciences in UK, Cambridge, MIT Lablet in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and then one also in Finland. Now for me, particularly, the customer-driven innovation in a company which actually can echo a sort of mixed situation with respect to the previous speaker is the fact that we sell things that end up with end customers, but we also, sort of end users, but we also have customers like carriers and others who just we deal with, so we have the same problem. On the other hand, we are looking at globally with respect to the users, so we in fact are interested in the users. And I want to stress the word global, because this is one of the issues that, in particularly, although I'm a Finn, I've lived a lot in the US, so semi-Americanized like that. For us, the situation is very different than what you see only in the North America, which is like emerging markets, India, China, Latin America, Africa, Europe. All these areas globally reflect totally different challenges for our innovations. And depending on the area and segment, the different things are really becoming more and more important for us to find out the differentiations, look at the groups. It's sort of like a large-scale, long tail of issues which are facing we are facing globally, and that's a real challenge for us. And that's one of the key issues that we need to address in Nokia Research, whose task is to lead Nokia in its renewal. So
I'm going to come back and ask you about how you handle the input from the customers. Michelle?
Okay. Michelle Barber. I work for Genesis Telecommunication Laboratories, which is a distributor of software for contact centers and call centers worldwide. So also a very global company with very complex software. We at Genesis have many customer touch points. Most of them reside in marketing. What I'm responsible for is creating a touch point for the product side of the house. So I report into the Chief Technology Officer, and I actually act as a bridge. My function, my role, acts as a bridge between the marketing customer voice and the core or center of innovation that sits in product. And as such, I come from product management, but actually now have a bridging function between the marketing side of the house and the technology side of the house, and currently just an office of one with a ad hoc group. So I can pull from marketing, I can pull from product management, technical support, when I'm actually running these meetings that are very similar to this with our customer base.
Okay. I'm going to go back and start with Michael here. You mentioned a dilemma I think a lot of people face in a company, which is that you have two sets of customers. You have the people who buy the product, and then you have the people who use the product. And same thing with the phone company, where you have the carriers dictating certain requirements. How do you balance that? You've got to sell to one group of people, but you've got a bunch of users who are, how does the feedback work back to you so you know what the end users want?
Yeah, there's no other way than going out yourself to your customers' sites and sitting with your end users. This is actually what has made SAP strong in the beginning, because our founders, 5 people who left IBM to do something better than selling, mainframes, they were literally sleeping at the sites of our customers. They didn't have their own data center, so they were using the data centers and the mainframes of our customers, working at night, taking the stuff they developed in the morning to the people at the company and say, hey, look at this, what do you think about it? So they had a daily feedback loop. In a big company like SAP, that gets lost. Over time, you have the salespeople that talk to your customers, pre-sales people, the few people that actually bring back some feedback into the product organization. Product organization being very busy writing specs and figuring out what the marketing messaging is going to be and so on. Few people actually go to the customer, because it's cumbersome. Customer may tell you some things that you don't want to hear, or you say you don't have a budget. So the customer's voice, meaning the buyer's voice, actually prevails. So you build features that you're not sure who really needs them. When you go to the end users, you see, wow, that feature that was developed is actually not being used. We have in enterprise software, we have to deal with the phenomenon of shelfware. Salespeople sold something that never gets implemented. Or it gets even implemented, but it never gets used. Because people, on the grassroots, on the working desk, they find their workarounds. What we've seen is a lot of, for instance, use of office productivity features. Excel. There's probably not a single company that hasn't been run on Excel, at some point in time of their existence. We know all the problems that are, associated with that. Right next to Excel is a nice screen with all the enterprise features, but nobody's using it. So, shelfware, software that gets implemented but not used, and all these workarounds. To somebody who is a user researcher, and software companies employ these people, but I would argue not enough of those people. Not enough of the people that actually can go out and do ethnographic research, that can sit with the end users and take the right feedback home, that would ask the right questions. When I say the right questions, it's not the, where should this button be on your screen? More questions like, what is your task? What are you trying to accomplish here? What makes it hard for you? Who do you work with? How many times have you wished that this software would do something different? So those types of people, I don't think we have enough in our company. I would even say not enough in our industry.
Gervais Restaurant, authentic French cuisine in Silicon Valley.
So, what do you do when you bring all this home? When you come back from hundred thousands of end user interviews, how do you systematize that In our team we built a repository of structured and unstructured data. You bring back very different artifacts. It can be pictures, it can be voice, so a little recording with a little iPod, interviewing people at their desk. It can be movies. We found out that actually when you want to convince stakeholders about the importance of some new feedback that you've gotten, showing a 5 or 10-second movie clip is much more important than showing 10 pages of PowerPoint. Nobody's going to argue with a customer that just was there on screen with an end user that says, this feature sucks. You can't argue with that. If you put it on a PowerPoint, you know how this gets whittled down, right? Customer said this feature sucks, then we say, yeah, there's room for improvement, and all of a sudden the message gets lost. So in a company like ours, we have approached the problem of how do you put all this feedback into a big knowledge repository? How do you make it searchable? How do you use things such as tagging to be able to add your own tags, to share your research with others, to find the research? I believe few companies have actually done that. Few companies have done that, and in our team we basically spared those methods.
I would agree with that, is that one of the things about collecting research and going out and getting to know your customer and bringing that back to the corporate headquarters, it's really difficult to actually disseminate that information. And the fact of the matter is you need a mechanism to actually hold the information and have that information actually influence what you do next. Because that's really the critical part of understanding what the customer wants, what they need, and how does that actually influence and impact what you do next. And that's where we're in the phase where we're just launching our product advisory council, and that is the most difficult aspect of the entire chain. It's really easy to go out there. Customers really want to talk, just like everybody here wanted to design their own clock. That's a good example. They want to provide you with that information because they don't think that you're listening to what they need. So you go out there, you have these meetings, you bring that information back. How do you actually socialize that within your company and actually make that something actionable in your product plans, and also communicate what you've done back to the customers? That's where I find the challenges lie.
Henry, your customers vote with their fingers, I guess, in a way, right? You've got a phone, everybody has and is using the end product. I used to say for years, telephone software was obviously invented in Japan because nobody could figure out how to use it. But you guys, it's come a long way, obviously, and phones have come a long way, but you've got the same dilemma that he has. You have the carriers who are dictating features, and you've got the customers trying to use all the features on the phone, and I think most of them are still trying to figure them out.
Well, actually, it's much worse. You see, you again take the US-centric view, where the carriers dictate the phones. In Europe, or where I come from, Finland, we got used to, so we buy our phones, we get the carrier SIM, and we just buy whatever phone. So the users actually choose the phones. Right. So we have the both markets. So right. And then this makes the game sort of interesting if you take the constraints that you have. In an ideal world, of course, if you can build, we're actually doing about 40 models a year, but basically if you could build like hundreds of different models, of course you could like tailor everything, and you can tailor part of it with software like the carriers do. But in fact, we are facing this problem that we are shipping about close to 300 million of those boxes like that with some things every year. So there are the challenges of then seeing that what things would first of all would be embedded in these boxes and in these devices. Now I'm deliberately a little bit going out of my own turf in the sense that I'm actually not that interested in only talking about the handset, but it's a good way to illustrate these things. For me, in fact, we are now approaching the era where we are, instead of having a fixed grid, we are having a wireless grid. In addition of having a digital world separated from the physical world, we are merging it very fast, both with sensors location, the context that you can get. So everything is like merging together with the internet. So the customer gains more and more complex. Like, from a layman perspective, the complexity comes from several different things. One of them, first of all, the features that sit on these devices with the interfaces, like you said, I totally agree. Like the complexity of a modern computer, like the N series handsets are like my Word. Who on earth here can use all the features of Microsoft Word? At least I've used it for 15 years and I have no clue. So it's the same thing. There are a lot of features, first of all, that are there, and then in addition to that. The most interesting part is for us, or from my perspective, is to find the disruptive uses of things. So the challenge is twofold. First of all, to find how people use these devices together with the services that go with the devices, because the devices themselves are nothing. I mean, it's the voice service that you've been used to. Now we moved to the data services. We are moving actually to all sort of new type of community services that we can implement. A banking, new type of control, merging with the global, and also these services we can group them. But the second thing is, an interesting part from my perspective is, what are the things that people come up with, the users come up with the things that you sort of decided and designed to be something else, but people start just using it. The same way like SMS, the messaging that became so big in Europe was born for totally sort of different reasons than the people find out. So that's a real challenge. Then another challenge is that, I still have my heart of this. I still have my chair of professor of computer science there in Finland. So my heart has been a lot of modeling for the 15 years for intelligent systems. So one of the interesting things which we also learn is that with the facilities we have, we are interested in what people actually do, not what they say they do. There's a big difference, believe me. Take this message. I mean, I'm not a great fan of any of this questionnaires, the different forums, people giving feedback on this. Either like we do both the Nokia Research and also the product units as ethnographic studies, but it's also that we have nowadays automated mechanisms to see what actually happens with the device. The more you merge digital and physical worlds, the stronger this thing comes. The same way like Google rules the sort of intentions of the peoples by the query word distributions that they can handle. The same way in the long run we have a way of analyzing, which actually as a side effect will change the social scientists in research also a lot heavily, what people actually do. So that's one of the key questions that we are facing at NRC.
So you're able to, when you're saying see what people actually do, you can track the features they use,
yes,
ways they use
the patterns, the very complex patterns, which are those observable things, which are reflecting the latent things, meaning the hidden things that there. Hidden things are like intentions, feelings, how do you want to go, what's and you see those, and the same way like you can do this this sort of reverse engineering. You can do a reverse engineering in a scale where you can see then the law of large numbers helping to understand, the same way like optimization is done in search engine, for example.
So would you say that the holy grail of end-user research is actually embedding feedback hooks into the product itself, be it software, be it hardware?
I don't say it's a holy grail, but it's an important new aspects that we can nowadays do for two reasons. That we have an evolution of getting better measuring things, and second, as a research, a better ways of analyzing these things. So, but it will never replace the qualitative sort of semantic understanding. So one should not take this as a data mining pitch on that let's everybody move to this out of data mining world. But think about for the power of having 100 million user behaviors tracked.
Right, I'd like to build on that because I think I work in a company where we have very complex software, so we'll never grow beyond 3,000 to 5,000 customers. Also, the building of the software is very time consuming. So having research to provide customer feedback at the end of the process isn't enough for us. And actually what we're doing is trying to get in front of the customer, in front of our roadmap, in front of our strategy, and collect that information in order to guide our journey with our customers' journey based on regional input or geographical differences or industry differences, and influence that 2 years in advance of the product coming out.
But what about privacy? If you track whatever.
Oh no, this is a common thing which I'm usually in fact answering this question before, because it's asked, because it comes now. Of course, there's a trade-off between things. Now I want to just give you 2 short answers, because this will be like a never-ending discussion if we go in this one. Privacy, there are ways of doing tracking in statistical sense that don't necessarily violate any individual privacy, or you can give a sort of a guarantee on this that is enough for a user. That's one answer. Second, this is very much related with the payoff. So there are these like things that I've argued occasionally as extreme examples of pandemia. So if you do a tracking or something that is, let's say a handset that is sniffing or can hear your voice patterns or coughing, you would think it's an invasion of your privacy because of insurance and all this stuff, and companies can use this information, and you might get all the hassle again. On the other hand, if there's a pandemia, influenza going around, and you would join the service by joining this, having this service on your handset, but also getting then warnings of the areas where you have a more likely sort of situation where you encounter this thing, would you then again say that this is a violation of your privacy? You would not use it. So there's a deep question of course everybody's not interested in the privacy violations if there's no incentive for it. You just say that, yeah, we track everything and you don't know what is happening on this one. If there's something that sort of helps you and also guarantees you the same way, like the privacy regulation, for example, in Europe, protect some of the calling patterns of by the carriers. It's still a question of trust to the carriers, a third party. Of course, all this could be tracked, what you've been calling, and we know that the governmental agencies in many countries are doing, of course, this anyway.
I want to go back, and I'll get to questions after this. I want to ask one last question here. So you guys you're listening to customers, you're seeing their patterns of behavior, and you're trying to design products that work for them. What about feedback to the customer in the sense of saying, well, we've done this? Well, because the other frustration that customers can have is they feel you're not listening. They don't feel like you're responding to their needs. How do you let them know that you're responded or you created that feature they wanted?
It's actually a very good question. In terms of collecting the research is just one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is, and many companies are doing that right now, going out to your end users with prototypes of what you're going to ship. I mean, what we just built here in the innovation game, right, is nothing but a prototype. Nobody prevents us from going maybe to price and just say, would you buy this thing? What else would you want to see in here? Did we listen to you correctly? We understood that you said A. This is what we did with the product. So collecting the feedback on prototypes the second time before the product ships. Actually, that is the flip side of the coin. I'd also like to add one thing. Enterprise software is not a throwaway game in a sense that a new version can be completely different from the old version. You know, you can do that, not even with cell phones you can do it, I would argue, because you have all your personal settings and your address books and so on. You need to somehow transfer that. And the usage pattern should somehow be similar, because otherwise the customers will tell you, we have such a huge training effort here, we're not going to buy your new features, even though they're innovative, but we're just fine with the old stuff. So you have to have that in mind as well. That creates a nice conundrum for people like ourselves that have to build software that builds on what has been built before.
Anybody else?
No, I just wanted to just agree a lot of this thing, even if I'm talking about, we also have like enterprise, of course, enterprise solutions is doing this, a lot of this stuff with enterprise, but I'm now very user-centric or consumer-centric now. Of course, I mean, there's a lot of these things which is a legacy. The look and feel, which is simply the fact that who on earth would like to just to learn every time when you get a new handset to do all these things, and how do you find this, what is your alarm clock, or how do you set this calendar, and how is synchronizing, in addition to the fact that you want to transport a certain amount of information. In fact, more and more information if you consider that you have gigabytes of memory on these devices, and you start storing all the images and start storing various different things, and you need to synchronize. So there's a big hassle and big legacy you're facing. So that's one thing. Coming back for your feedback question, that's a very good and interesting thing. I'm still more concerned of the fact that in many cases, the real problem in at least in the world that I'm looking at, is not so much that what the user says they want and did they get it back, but it's what they actually wanted. I mean, so when you give you have to give, so for me that's an experimental game. You have to give it back and see how they use it, and whether they use it the way that the feature that they wanted. They wanted to have this nice feature to connect to their friends, 5 closest friends on the web, on Messenger. But when you look at it and they give the product, they never use, I mean, they use it for the first 2 days, and it's like this Pepsi challenge in this tipping point. It's like you just taste it, and then you say, okay, that wasn't actually I wanted. It was not fun anymore. So that's the real challenge, that even giving the features that are required and doing that well, that might be the fact that it doesn't help at all in the life cycle of the use of the product.
Gervais Restaurant, authentic French cuisine in Silicon Valley.
I'm going to stop and start with questions. Let me start with him, and you would.
On your point, Henry, there was a column real recently in the New York Times. David Pogue was saying something. It was something about what's not available in cell phones that people would want, and people wrote in, and he had a column saying, gee, wouldn't it be great if we had like about 10 features or something, and they all sounded really good. And then on the blog that came after it, all these people wrote in and said, well, I've been able to do this on my Nokia phone for the last, anywhere from 1 to 5 years. But the problem is that because it's not absolutely intuitive how to do it, people don't know. So the question, if you're going to use your model of just monitoring people's usage patterns, how can you know whether people don't do it because they don't care about that, or because they just don't know how?
No, actually, it gives only clues for the fact that if there is, first of all, it gives a good streamlining that if people are never using, or very minorities using something, if you take it away, nothing sort of happens from the user perspective as a community very much, except for the very few people. But you're totally correct. It doesn't solve the problem of saying that whether this, what I call the sort of exploratory challenge, is that if you have, or counterfactual, if you had this feature which would be easy enough to use, where people would not use. I want to point you out an example which is a very typical one. It comes out of it. Many, many years, 6, 7 years ago already, there was a facility of doing a location-based thing on a device. In fact, if you look at for example, Nokia handsets, for years and years, they even have an icon that says something about location and whatever. It's just not enabled by the carriers. So, for example, this is a typical example where the customer and the user, there's a big, really complexity in our world of the fact that there would be technologically possibilities of doing this, but if they are blocked by something in between, that would not happen. But you're correct. I mean, the ease of use is the key of everything. No feature whatsoever is used except in an emergency if it's not easy enough to be used. Okay.
So I have a two-part question. One is, do you widely use ethnographical methods? And then the second part of the question is, when you just collect data, like based on the users, do you lose the context information, where they're using the and how they're using the terms?
If you want to have my answer as a modeling, sort of deep modeling question, the context is all, I mean, we have infinite amount of information around us at any particular point. It's even it's complex because there are these hidden things like the intentions of the user, and on the other hand, there's a lot of context information that cannot be captured. My point is that, first time, we use a lot of ethnographic studies, Nokia, by far, because of the wide global market we have that has to be done. Second is that, my point was just that there's been a heavy underuse of this tracking or this automatic quantitative data, if you want to make this distinction on this, because it has not been possible beforehand, in the past, to collect that data and analyze that data well. And those complement each other. But you're correct, always there is an information that is lost. But interesting enough, if we play this number game, and we talk about hundreds of millions of phones that we study, in this number game, the major trends in the quantitative game become very important for us. But they don't solve the long tail problem that well, because of the small communities that have very specific needs to do things. So the ethnographic is helping us in the long tail, quantitative in the general.
Thank you.
You answered part of my question, which was more on the ethnographic, but I would be interested in two thoughts. How are you using like online community mechanisms where customers are actually talking to other customers and you're listening in? And part of that, the second part of that question is, how are you developing sustained collaboration with your customers?
So I'd like to take a shot at that because that's really the focus of our projects. So we have a portal which doesn't have our brand on it, and that portal is for all end users to have conversations, and then blogs from our executives, and for my office, we're actually using that as our communication vehicle, tying together customers from different parts of the world, right? So we are using an online system to create conversations among customers. So for us, it's not quantitative data that we need, it's qualitative data. And qualitative data is a few number of customers that are strategic in their thinking and important to the business, influencing us with information that we gather in conversations and exercises like this. And you had a second part is how...
Well,
how do we ongoing collaboration?
What's the sustained mechanisms of actually collaborating with your customer rather than sort of one-off focus groups?
Right. So this, when you develop a community, and you actually spend your time and energy in creating that community and sustaining the community will form itself. And having scheduled types of either webinars or meetings, in face-to-face meetings, actually sustains that collaboration with, again, the important part is having that feedback mechanism to the customers that actually committed their time to giving you the input, right? So connecting back.
Michael, you want to?
Yeah, as far as SAP is concerned, we're just at the brink of starting our much more sophisticated community efforts. The first community that actually we put out was a community of developers, so-called SDN, the SAP Developer Network. That's more for techies. That's for people who want to share code samples, who've done some nice hacks, who've linked SAP up with other technologies and so on. Those are not the typical end users. So from there on, the next thing that we rolled out is called the BPX, Business Process Expert Community. Those are people that care about how business processes run. They're not necessarily the end users. They're more the power users that would set up your system, that would enable features or disable features. Those are third-party consultants and so on. We're now only thinking about getting the end users in there. Again, to listen to them, but also to give them a voice to share things among themselves. And there's companies out there, Cisco as an example, where lots of customer service problems actually get solved through the community. So the business case is very easy. The savings that you have in your call center, because your own customers are solving the problems amongst themselves, could easily offset, what it costs to run and build the infrastructure for a community. You also have to reflect on that. I think, Michelle, you said it, in terms of you don't brand it with your company.
Right.
That's a community that's run by users. They have their own ideas. They don't want your corporate colors and your corporate marketing officer to basically censor whatever's being said on the community. If you do this,
You really got to be ready for some ugly feedback too. But you can't just take off because you don't like it. It's there. And your customers can see it, your prospects can see it, people that want to make a buying decision can see it. I would argue though, that has never ever, prevented a sale from happening. I think being honest with your customers, with your prospects, wins in the long run.
I just want to add something. It's going to be too lengthy discussion. Of course, we have the communities. We have the same thing. We have the developer communities, which help, in fact, us to see the techie side of it. We have communities with the special test communities in different areas of our interest to do these things. But the most interesting part from our perspective is the fact that, I don't know if you ever, but go and check. And when we come up with the new model, a phone that comes out or a handset that comes out, in 2 days, try to guess how many blogs, email, discussion, community, whatever groups which have nothing to do with Nokia branding or anything. Discuss, this sucks, this works, it's beautiful, it doesn't. And this of course holds the same thing in the whole industry. So the same thing if Motorola comes up with a new Razr, or there was a new phone with some music playing capability immediately. So we, of course, that is a sort of a happy and interesting thing, is to see that there's a lot amount, sort of a lively amount of people that are just walking around and giving very honest feedback. The only challenge is that you get this feedback from techies, you get feedback from sort of regular customers, so it's somewhat biased. So you also get, because the web, it's still not an equal world in the sense that what people are blogging and who's doing it. So if you go to emerging markets, this will not hold that much. But in US market, you get the feedback. The question is that how do you filter it? How do you look at it? What is the impact on your research? How do you or development, and how you go forward with that? And how do you contact? Like we do contact, in fact, people or really active communities that are sort of testing these things and I mean independently testing and talk to them afterwards.
Questions, sir, back there?
Yeah, so customers are very good at giving feedback on existing features that you have in a product today. But if you're trying to get more disruptive, innovative ideas, it's harder to do that directly from your customers. And I'm wondering what you do differently, or how do you go about getting some of those innovative ideas from them?
Well, this is exactly the point that I've already mentioned. I get twice, so I get my third message on the same thing. Yeah, I mean, for me, this is the greatest challenge. I mean, the things that I've been talking about very much has been like the side of the core technology development and how to go ahead, and we all have these problems. For me, the interesting challenge is that if we come up with a system, a concept, service together, like sort of iPhone together with some various different services, how do you see that? What are the disruptive things? First of all, what are being used, or can the users themselves invent the new ways of doing it? The way that people figure out having a rather awkward ways of occasionally using some concepts that they have, and then look at that and improve it and say, hey, this is the idea. Everybody wants to talk to each other transparently over this grid, or they want to use it, and then take that idea and go forward. That's my best answer on this one. Because of course, like again, I'm saying, we try to guess things which cannot be seen, because they have been not designed in this concepts that we do.
In the area of design-led innovation, we actually put the emphasis on what are people trying to achieve. You don't ask them what feature do we want next, or what should it look like, because you won't get an answer to that. You get better answers when you ask, so what workarounds are you using? Or show me, why is that yellow sticker on your screen there? What does it mean? What is that number? They will tell you stories about it. Then you have to go back and figure out, okay, so how can we solve that problem? Apart from all the features and new buttons and so on. And sometimes, it's about eliminating a whole piece of software and rewriting it completely.
Or eliminating the whole product.
Yes, ma'am.
Innovation process also is monetizing. Now, one of the challenges with mobile phones is because people change phones so often, whether it's enterprise product or consumer-based applications, they need to reside on the phone. When people have moved on to another phone, it's the challenge of getting these enterprise products or consumer products back on your phone. First, if you were signed up with Nokia or Sony Ericsson, you've got to figure out, filter through all the stuff that you're giving, or even download it. So how do you see this kind of making it easier? Because you're giving an innovative product, but I can't figure out where it is to go use it.
No, I mean, this is the whole idea of systems research centers, what I said, holistic things that actually couple what the functions are and what are needed together with the thing. And in fact, you should not configure the device. I mean, or whatever. I'm not even thinking about it as a device. I'm actually thinking it as a service. You want to find out a navigation service, and it comes maybe with the device, maybe some server end stuff that goes on, some infrastructure facility that allows you to position yourself and going this. And that's the functionality you want to have. And this is very voice-centric. We are now living in an era where there's a great transition from the original use of the voice-centric main use of handsets to this wireless grid, where you see data services going more and more to the edges of the internet, which are then on these whatever devices happen to be there. But the device itself is not of value by itself. And having all these separate functions in it and configuring it every time, it's the wrong way of going. That's gotta do. Now I just want to mention one more thing, because it just happens to coincide today, is that we have this, we today in fact launched a small business plan competition called Web 2 Mobile, which just allows, as an NRC here in the Valley and in Finland, to people to compete on business plans on mobile devices and applications on top of mobile devices. So hey guys, this is a good community, go for that. The finalists will then go in January. I think it ends in 10th of December, the first phase, and the finalists in January go in front of this panel, and the winner gets then to work at NRC test labs to work with business ideas and other various sort of technology challenges that you have in your idea. So you don't have to be a techie to, in that sense, do it. I mean, this is the idea that you can come and work around it. So that actually would be a great chance if you start thinking about it. I'm just challenging you, not only because of having this competition or whatever, but you ever step in my shoes and you try to do this and try to figure out a good application area with the users, consumers are using, which could be used on handheld devices, you will very soon see all these challenges that come up in this design.
Sounds like an innovation competition.
Well, it's a lot. There's a web page called www.makeweb2mobile.org, but just to try to look it in Google after a while, so probably you'll also find it there.
Or an AOL.
Or AOL, or whatever. I don't know, any search engine, doesn't matter. We are search engine agnostic.
It's practically a preface to my question, which was for the panelists and for the moderator, is when Judy Estrin spoke earlier this morning, she talked about the difficulties of funding innovation and how frustrating it was when the venture community was looking for customers, looking for a product that already existed. And she said, that's not innovation if you're funding something that already has customers. Could all of you perhaps talk about, I know Red Harry has been very involved in covering this, what about funding innovation today? Where is it coming from? How do you see it moving forward?
I mean, if I can take a crack at it, I mean, there's internal innovation obviously happening at SAP in many different areas. If you look at the 5 to 10 years out, we got our own research facilities, also out here in Palo Alto, many other places around the globe to tap into the local talent. But we also do a lot of co-innovation with partners and with customers, especially with partners that want to sell and enable some of that, what people usually call the long tail of applications that are very specific for a certain industry or for a certain country. We actually build that into our platform that through composite applications, as we call it, you don't have to go and know everything about SAP in order to write your own applications. We have service enabled it, so you can write your own little piece and it will, well, I'm not saying plug and play, but more seamlessly work with the rest of the SAP applications. So that is where we take some of the risk, I would say, of innovation and have our partners support that risk for SAP. Because we can't do everything. For us, it may not be economically viable to do something for an industry that only has 100 customers. I think you mentioned 3,000 customers, right? So we would gladly give that to a partner. They can run that business, specialize in that, and so on. There's some core efforts that we're going to take, though. The platform itself is something that's competitive to SAP. It's called NetWeaver, for those of you that are a little more familiar with technology. You know, this is something that we won't give away. So funding it, different things, obviously internal budgets, R&D budgets, teams like ours that teaches the company how to use customer and end user input for innovation, but also the NetWeaver fund that we give, a couple $100 million that we allocated to our partners. So if you're a small software company, come to SAP with your ideas, with your proposals, and we can fund that just as a VC would do it, but in a much more targeted manner.
Well, I can just take a minute to stop here. First of all, nobody can do these things alone. I challenge anybody who says that there's a company in the IT industry or any of these industries that can do these things anymore alone. There's innovation. So it's an open innovation game. Partially it's, like I said, the corporate R&D related facts. So we work together with the universities, with other companies, with other research labs, and in the Silicon Valley, we're just looking forward, NRC, working together even with startup companies to do this. In addition, we have our own venturing organizations, so we can sort of spin off things and do this. So there are various different ways of doing this collaborative funding towards innovation, even for very small sort of companies or small startups, to the degree of partnerships, which we need to do. We're already doing the partnership in the traditional areas with chip manufacturers and whoever, but we're also interested in doing this partnership nowadays, like we have a partnership with Yahoo, together with our multimedia business division and so on.
And so for us, innovation is seeded by our R&D budget. So it's an internal process. It's a certain percentage of the R&D budget, which is 20% of the company's budget. And then it's 10% of that R&D budget that we focus just on innovative type, or bringing innovation into the core center. And then also using partnerships is pretty important. We don't really fall into the category of looking for venture funding or that, because we're an established company, but it's really how to use your partners and then how to actually sync up with your own R&D processes to turn innovative ideas, bring the right people into the company or hear those voices and then turn it into something actionable.
Just a quick overview of what's happening with venture capital, which is something we spent a lot of time looking at. Obviously, since 2000, there was that dramatic drop. VCs were scared, they were burned, they lost a lot of money. Even today, while it's made some comeback, the investment rate is about a third of what it was in the year 1999. Obviously, the NASDAQ has not come back like the Dow Jones has, which also reflects the fact that tech stocks have not, for the most part, done very well. So for the venture folks, I think are still in a, they're not as frightened as they were in, say, 2001. There's money being invested, but it's very cautious, and it tends to follow packs. So I don't have to tell you, you know, there have been 200 investments in social networking in the last year. So, you know, we know that, you know, probably 190 of those aren't going to work out. So they tend to follow patterns and you know, basically, you know, as much as they talk about due diligence, venture capitalists are good guessers. And the better guessers make the most money. And so you have companies like Sierra Ventures, which keep making really good guesses. And then they start thinking they're really smart. So the biggest challenge still is early stage financing, which is where you're talking about innovation. And the early stage funding is still extremely hard. More and more companies are bootstrapping. Friends and family are putting in money. And in fact, the fact that there are a lot of people who did make money in the last wave, a lot of these guys and women are putting money into very early stage companies. So you're seeing entrepreneurs putting in 100, 200,000 to get something started. But the biggest challenge right now is very early stage money, you know, coming out of the lab, maybe that first prototype, first product design, that's the toughest money. Once they've got a product and there are a few customers, the financing gets a lot easier.
I would like to add to that something that the chairman of our company, Hasselplattner, has done in Germany. He basically set up the Hasselplattner Ventures organization that would invest in very early, you mentioned seed stage, right? Very early stage companies, 2 people up to 10 people. And as part of that setup, sort of an incubator, set up a D-Labs, a design lab, that would actually serve all these companies. So basically putting design right in the heart of innovation, making sure that those companies are tied to their first end users, first potential customers as they develop their products. I found it a very, very innovative a way of thinking about, you know, how you run an incubator. Just as you need finance, as you need legal, you need design.
That was the last question.
Yeah, it's not really a question. I just wanted to follow off of the sort of venture funding thread. I work for an open source strategy company, so one of the things that we've seen is that open source is a way for companies to build a sort of a customer base and validate their ideas in the marketplace before going for venture funding. So you see a lot of companies like Sugar CRM, for example, that first started out as sort of an open source project and then became a commercial company and got venture funding because they had a big audience based on that open source. So I think it's not something that anybody's talked about, but open source is an interesting new trend in technology that allows people to try out innovation in the marketplace with sort of very low risk.
It's actually something we've written a lot about. If you guys haven't read Red Herring, I'll do the commercial. There are issues here you can pick up, and I think they even have a subscription card in it. But the open source community has really been a huge factor in a lot of these smart companies like Sugar CRM and some of the others that have come along, and where the innovation is coming from the customer, from the user base, and validates the product before they can get to the financing stage.
Gervais Restaurant, authentic French cuisine in Silicon Valley.